Okay, hello everybody. We're just kind of waiting for people to head out to their chosen sessions, but I think we're kind of settled. Everyone who is here is ready for this session. All right, so this is breakout number 1, building positive and inclusive youth spaces, social and physical environments. We're going to have our 3 speakers come and join us here on the stage. Then I'll introduce our session for the day and introduce our speakers. All right, we had a quick announcement. I know people are comfortable where they are. We tend to stay in the same place, but we're trying to split things up a little bit, and we'd like to have a few more numbers into the multipurpose room if anyone is kind of willing to check that one out first, and then come catch this one after. Great. Yep, just, she said 2 or 3, so 3 or 4 or so. Great. Thank you for being flexible. A reminder to everyone here, we also are joined by all of our virtual participants as well for this session. So we're going to ask you to keep using the microphone if you have questions, if you want to run to the center there or put your hand up and I can come and bring you this one. For anyone who doesn't remember, my name is Cass. I'm the creative director with IRP and kind of Tasha's sidekick for this couple of days. In this session, we have a few roles to play. My role is to introduce, get the conversation hopefully going. I have some guiding questions I can ask, but your role as participants is to really dig deeper into the conversation that we've been having for the last day and a half or so. So this is your opportunity to really ask questions, to put our speakers here to the test, to give you some guidance and some answers to those questions you might have had from the conversation that we've had in the last day or so. All right. Our first speaker here, and I'm just going to go in order, is Joe Zuccaretti.
Oh, you pronounce it right.
Ah,
Floor and
excellent.
No, you didn't pronounce it right.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, I did it right the first time. Shoot. Zucchiati. So close, so close. I did mention my Newfie accent yesterday, right? I'm fighting against it. I'm going to use that as my excuse. So Joe has for the past several years been the president of the Skate for Life Alliance, a ragtag but passionate group of skate park enthusiasts who successfully advocated for the construction of the mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing, new skate park in Whitehorse. Weather permitting, Joe spends much of his time at the new skate park finding exciting new ways to fall down on concrete. I've also been told that Joe is an accomplished poet. Is that right? Yeah.
That accomplished, but published.
So I'll put Joe to the test later. If you guys aren't asking questions, maybe we'll get him to do a on-the-spot poem for us. Also joining us is Isabelle Péché. In the past 15 years, Isabelle has gained experience working with youth in northern remote communities, working with schools, family services, recreation department, has brought a diverse experience, but also many rich connections throughout the territory. She now lives in Dakwakata, Haines Junction, where she brings opportunities in her own community, but also pilots a model to BGC, to Yukon, to develop and evaluate intentional, meaningful youth-centered programming for all rural communities. And last but certainly not least is Lindsay Johnston. And Lindsay is actually filling in for us. So we're going to actually give Lindsay some great thanks for filling the shoes of Roger, who couldn't make it. Lindsay is the president of RPAY, and I'll let her tell you a few words about herself. Just a reminder to our speakers that you each have your own microphone. And we do have our virtual participants. We need to make sure they can hear. So when you're speaking, make sure you're right up there. And for our participants, if you have questions, to just let me know, and I'll get you a microphone, or you can come right here to the center.
Yeah, hi. So my name's Lindsay Johnston, and I was asked this morning to fill in, and I said sure. And I didn't know who I was filling in for, so it actually works out pretty good that it is Roger, because I do sit as the president of RPay right now, but I also am the rec manager for the Village of Teslin Clinton Council. And I always like to preface that with, in Teslin, we have a really unique partnership between the municipal government and the First Nation government with recreation at the focus. So there's a joint rec fund that helps fund my position there. So I work for both governments in that rural community. And prior to the 3 years that I've spent in Teslin, I was in Old Crow working for the Funtuck-Witchin First Nation for 5 years. So I got a pretty good background in recreation here in the territory, working in the rural communities. And before that, yeah, sport and rec was a big focus of my life. So that's definitely the angle that I'm going to take with this unprepared seat on this couch here. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Joe, if you could get us started and tell us a bit about your program.
Sure. Oh, there we go. All right. First thing I'm just going to start. Thank you all for being here. And I just want to say hi to my skateboarding brother and Italian cousin, Quana Giuseppe Vandermeer, who's up in Beaver, and he's joining us online. Quana's a character. It's too bad he can't be in here in person, but a lot of fun. I thought in light of what we heard yesterday, I thought I'd see if I could remember a quote by a skateboarding journalism pioneer, Craig Stesick. And he said that 200 years of American technology has unwittingly created a massive concrete playground with unlimited potential. But it was the minds of 11-year-olds who could realize that potential. And so I'm going to talk about this little toy here with 4 wheels and how it becomes a part of your soul. Like a lot of kids of my generation, I grew up in a town without a skate park. So once we sort of graduated from our driveways, we would it's almost like we could smell fresh blacktop being poured across town, and we would just go there because it would be the smoothest, funnest surface to skateboard on. And for a while, it was the old folks' home in Terrace. And now things are coming full circle. I'll be 50 next year, which is approximately 107 in skateboarder years. And I'm kind of looking at that as a viable housing option. So if you can think of an old folks' home that's maybe got a mini ramp or a skatable pool, I'm all in. Maybe my next project. I was born in 1973, which coincidentally was the same year that the urethane skateboard wheel came on the market. And that changed the game in skateboarding completely, because prior to that, people used steel roller skate wheels, which were, they're great on a smooth surface, but first law of physics is an object in motion wants to stay in motion unless something stops it. Well, anything can stop a steel wheel. So the skateboard would stop, but the skateboarder would keep going and just wreck on the pavement. After that, they had clay wheels, which were not actually clay, but they were a composite material that was primarily composed of crushed walnut shells. Environmentally friendly, perhaps, but if you were bombing a hill, those wheels could disintegrate immediately. Again, that first law of physics, skateboarder ends up on the concrete, not a very good idea. But these could roll over lots, and as an added bonus, they could grip to vertical surfaces. And an enterprising group of teenagers in California figured out, strange coincidence, but shortly after these came on the market, there was a drought in California, and you couldn't fill up your swimming pool. And bunch of enterprising teenagers in California figured out that you could skateboard in empty swimming pools, and skateboarding went boom. So they started building skate parks all across California and the United States. Problem with them was, not a problem with them, but due to these were mainly privately owned. A lot of it was like, dentists. My dad was a dentist, so I know this. They famously hate their jobs, and they're always looking for get-rich quick schemes so that they can retire from that and do something different. So a lot of businessmen ended up building skate parks. And these crumbled for a number of reasons. One of them was they were pay to play. So you had to get your parents to come down, sign a waiver, and you had to pay your $5 or whatever it was to use it. Created barriers for a lot of kids. Two, the liability laws were outrageous. So you had to pay a lot of money in liability insurance, and a lot of the places couldn't necessarily afford that. Three, they weren't terribly well designed. And then I guess the fourth thing was in the 1980s, there was a crippling economic recession. So again, we'll go back to my dad, the dentist. He had a get rich quick scheme where he built some apartments in Terrace, British Columbia, and interest rates went to 21%. Well, how can anybody afford to pay, at 21% on anything really? So a lot of the skate parks at that time crumbled. Interestingly, Canada had different liability laws. So there were two skate parks built in the Vancouver area in the 1970s. Guana, China Creek represent. Guana skated China Creek extensively. And then there was also Salem Skate Park in North Vancouver. Both of them are still there. They're still public skate parks. California was different. And then by 1990, there was only two extant skate parks in the entire United States. It was unbelievable to think about. There was a gentleman by the name of Jim Fitzpatrick. He had been a Hobie and Makaha team rider in the 1960s. And he took it upon himself to change the liability laws in California. And he went and visited a lawyer friend of his, and they just said, basically, it's impossible. It'll never happen. You can't make it happen. And he thought otherwise. So he started doing some research. It took him 4 years of daily work. He said thousands of emails, thousands of phone calls. Basically, what he found two key things. One, there was an obscure California law called, it had a list. It was called the Hazardous Recreational Activities List. And it had a bunch of things that were basically inherently dangerous. One of these things was tree climbing. So if any of you decide on your lunch break today that you want to go climb a tree and you fall out and hurt yourself, good luck finding a lawyer to sue somebody, because tree climbing is inherently dangerous. Spelunking is another thing. So if you go exploring a cave and you bump your head or it caves in on you, nobody's liable for that except for you. Strangely, skateboarding was not on that list of hazardous recreational activities. So theoretically, if you were riding a skateboard on somebody's private property and you hurt yourself, you could sue them. I kind of know this from experience, because in the 1990s, when I was trying to skateboard in Vancouver, you'd find a big empty parking lot somewhere, a parking lot 10 times the size of this room, completely empty. The security guards would show up and throw you out and say, no, you can't be here because you might break something, you might hurt yourself, we don't want to get sued, right? Anyhow, he ended up, in 1997, he was able to overturn these liability laws. And again, skateboarding went boom, because all of a sudden you could build public skate parks. And I'm talking about California because that's really the alpha and omega of skateboarding culture in the world. So once they started building parks there, everybody else followed suit with this public skate park model. So it's been 25 years since that law has become overturned. And we've seen, a huge blossoming in public skate parks internationally. I think the United States currently has upwards of 3,200. And Canada has about, I don't know, officially, Canada Skateboard is is it Skateboard Canada? Skateboard Canada, I believe, is the official organization. They count 500 public skate parks in Canada, but I know they're missing a lot because ours isn't on the list. Watson Lakes isn't on the list. But what's happened is the skateboard design has started getting really, really good. And so what they're doing is soliciting input from community members. And then they're having skateboarders, many of whom have engineering degrees, design the parks. And yeah, I could go for some water because I'm not. Gracias. So yeah, so for example, the guy that started designing our park, and there was a few different designers on the Whitehorse skate park, was a former professional skateboarder named Canton Russell, and he subsequently got an engineering degree. So not only does he know skateboarding and he knows what skateboarders want to ride, but he also had the technical know-how to make it happen. So we're seeing that more and more. And then you've got builders who are also skateboarders. So just about without exception, every single person who built our skate park was a skateboarder. And they had a real vested community interest. Only one of them was from here. They were from all over, but they had a vested interest in making it the best skate park possible. So even if there was flaws in the design, they would be like, no, 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 no. We're not doing that to you people. We can make this better. We can make this more skatable. And it was a real passion project for them. So, I mean, I don't know the last time you had a plumber work on your house, you probably didn't hug them at the end of it. But by the time these guys finished building the skate park, that's what we were doing, was hugging them, right? So it was, and we got to play with them a little bit too, right? So we all got to skateboard with them and, test out the product. Really fun. So what it's done is create environments that people really want to come to. So not just youth, but also, people like me who maybe took a break from skateboarding, but are coming back into it in their 40s and their 50s. You got guys like Ian, who's kind of, I call him, if you can't beat him, join him, breed of skateboarder, where his kids are like so stoked on skateboarding. But Ian doesn't want to sit on his butt and look at his phone or something like that. So he comes out and skates too. And it's created a really interesting community from my perspective, because I've talked to guys that are a little bit younger than me, say like in their late 30s, who, they grew up at the old skate park, and they said it could be kind of a hostile environment where, you had to be at a certain level. If you can't kickflip, you're a poser, you got to get out of here. Well, now it's a little more inclusive. So you see 8-year-olds playing with 50-year-olds. And skateboarding is really interesting because it's basically where athletics, play, and art all come together. Some people want to treat it as a sport, and that's totally fine. Some people want to treat it as an art, and some people just want to goof around, and it all works together. But what's interesting to me is, it's really very, very informal, but what's interesting to me is that you've got these sort of informal mentorships happening at the local level, where you've got a lot of the older guys who've stayed in the game are sober. So, I've been sober for like 20 years. Another friend of mine, same way. Few of my other friends are kind of working on 4 or 5 years of sobriety, right? And we're also, as we're using skateboarding and play as sort of a means of maintaining our mental health, we talk about that with the kids, right? And they're kind of noticing it. And it's like, oh, Joe, you come out every single day on your lunch break and you go skateboarding. And I'm like, yeah, it just like burns off the stress. It's, it's fun. Get to hang out with you guys. It's very social. I wasn't expecting the social aspect when I got back into skateboarding. I just thought, it's too much fun. I have to go do it, right? But as you're at the park, every time you come to the park, you see people and you connect with them. So we'll give each other a quick fist bump or a hug or whatever. And then if you spend enough time around the skate park, you're invariably going to hear this. And kind of sounds like a beaver slapping its tail, but that's the way skateboarders clap for each other and cheer each other on. So you've got kind of an inborn culture of respect and encouragement, right? So, and some of these kids, I don't know, I get the feeling they don't have a lot of support at home, but it's very interesting to see some of them. And, I see a lot of hard sort of teenagers, and you talk sometimes about, kids whose hearts can kind of close down. Sometimes you could be, I'm sometimes a little trepidatious approaching teenagers just because you don't know how they're going to react. And I've had so many kids just like open their arms and give me a hug. And you can't necessarily do that. And, I spent some time as a student teacher way back when. You couldn't necessarily do that in a formalized setting, right? Where just because there's rules and blah, blah, blah. And so to me, it's very interesting. So, and then I have friends who are struggling and they want to talk to me. They're a little older, right? But they really want to talk to me about sobriety. How do you do it? What does it look like? How does that feel? And it's not perfect, but it's not nothing either. So I'm not really sure if I have anything more to say on the subject right now. We can maybe wait for some questions, but when I was thinking about this a little bit and thinking about skateboarding generally, and you'll often have a kid, some 9-year-old come up to you and say, "Hey, can you kickflip?" And I just on general principle, I don't even want to learn at this point. It just looks like a math problem. It looks like it hurts. I'm not, no. And but for the kids, it's all about tricks to a degree. But you stay in the game long enough, and what you realize is that skateboarding is really about the fun you have, the friends you make, the community you build, and the kind of person that you're working on becoming. And that's what it is to me.
Thank you, Joe. It's a lot of things about the skateboard culture that I wasn't aware of. Thank you for that. Joe will be open to some questions after, so get them ready. We'll pass it over to Isabel.
Good day, everyone. My name is Isabelle Pichet. I currently hold the title of Communities and Communication Director for BGC Yukon. I'm saying currently because in this organization, we don't focus on this is your title, this is your box. It's more than what is the need and what can you help with. So right now, I'm helping with the community connection and the communication within BGC Yukon. BGC, we used to be recognized as the Boys and Girls Club of Yukon. We have rebranded in April 2020 as a national movement. BGC is across Canada, and they have decided that our name was not reflective of what we do. So in order to be more inclusive, BGC National decided that the genders in our name does not belong there anymore. We don't want to box people that come into our clubs, so that's where we rebranded, and we are now named BGC only. So it's a very great step forward into the inclusivity of our new world and all the young people that are in it. A little bit of the history about BGC. We were founded in 1999, so we've been around for a little bit, 23 years. And I find it's a really good connection because BGC actually started at the skate park. We had a trailer there, and that's where our youth center, as the Youth Center Society in the skate park, that's where we started. We moved around a little bit in Whitehorse, and now we are next door to the food bank on Alexander Street. You will find in that little program where we talk about the Haines Junction Boys and Girls Club. I just want to specify that the Haines Junction d'Aquaquada is a special project that we're hosting right now. We're trying to work out a model and really learning for others that we can share our learning with. Kind of a model, how do we work in remote communities? How can we support our young people in receiving the service they need? So the Haines Junction part of BGC is where I'm working at. I'm a resident of Dakwakata Haines Junction for 5 years now. I've been working with different kind of organizations within Haines Junction to help and support just having services, recreation, sports. having a place to hang out, have a safe space in our community. That's what it was the big need. So the municipality actually reached out to BGC, knowing that we had a BGC champion residing within, and say, hey, we need help. Do you want to come and help? And it started with a summer camp project where the municipality had fundings, because sadly my community of Haines Junction does not have a recreation department at the moment. And we just condemned our pool, which was the big center of our community. So they say, BGC, could you come and do something with our young people? More than excited about this opportunity, we successfully delivered a summer camp there. We had just over 40 young people registered for the entire summer. 8 weeks camp. It was amazing. Having an outside organization showing up in the community kind of opened eyes that we actually have a need here. So that was the seed that we dropped, kind of the community say, this is what we can do. A model that we can reproduce everywhere. Since that, we have other communities, First Nation communities, that say, I'm hosting an event. Would you come and help us supporting our young people during events? Women's retreat, healing camp, things like that. So we've been traveling in the communities, not just in Haines Junction, but kind of bringing that model out there that we can come and support you with your needs. And that's where the inclusivity and the community building of BGC is coming in, where we're not just, yeah, I can do this, but we're responding to their need. We're being invited, and we're in a very respectful way. We're trying just to show up, and we're wanting to be here. We're open. You tell us what you want us to deliver. And that's a model that's been very successful. We've been able to adapt. We can host within a hall, a recreation space, a gymnasium. Oh, I've been asked to go, and I was so blessed to go in Cultus Bay, Kluane First Nation, way in the bush. We spent a week there with the children. The relationship that we built there just by showing up and making that trek, it takes about 5 hours from Whitehorse to go there. It's so worth it. But we have created relationship there with the young people that now I've seen them downtown here at our youth center in Whitehorse. So when they travel from the community, they know that when they come in Whitehorse, this is a safe space where they can connect to. So that's kind of my big job at the moment as a community director, where I want to share what we're doing. We can come to you and share our resources, share our model, do the coaching, the training. And yeah, that's really what we're trying to do. We're a not-for-profit organization. We don't attach, to anyone other than BGC Canada. We work closely with, from the top of my head, at least 5 First Nations right now, we're so blessed that they invite us on their territory to deliver really meaningful and intentional programming, and then we're able to train their staff or build a capacity within so they can keep going with what they learn. So as an example, in the past, that was prior my time with BGC, but our executive director, Lindsay Cornell, is from Carcross and has worked with the community of Carcross kind of to help develop a little bit their program. At some point, Carcross said, thank you so much for your help. We're going to take it from here. And if we need anything else, then we can reach out. So I think they adopted like our collars, some of the tools or the documentation that we're doing. And now they just reach out, we do this, do you want to come hang out, and things like this. So that's one way that we supported this community. Right now in Haines Junction, the school is one of our main folks that say, hey, we need you to come hang out. So when they brought us with the need for us to be there, and it was kind of the same time where I spent a great week with Lindsay in Dawson City with our pay gathering there. And I was really trying to, there was a lot of communities there, and learn from what's been tried out there and learn from their lesson. So I looked at what was already happening in Haines Junction. We are very lucky that due to the lack of a recreation department, there's a lot of volunteers that stepped up in the community and provide some recreation. So we have basketball nights, we have volleyball nights. And technically those are for 13 and older. It's kind of open. There's a lot of adults that come there. So I see them and I say, how can I help you? What do you need for support? I say, here's what I can access to, and it's not a plug, but RP helped a lot with this. With the Real Leader program and their grants that can help communities, I was able to support those volunteers. So now we have BGC presence in Haines Junction Community School every night of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, where we just support the volunteers that are already doing the great work. We brought in funding. BGC were big about food, and I want to touch base a little bit about that, but we're bringing healthy snack. Before basketball, which is like 7 to 8:30, then I show up with ingredient and include the young people in coming to cook for all the snacks for the entire week that we're going to deliver in the evening time. So it's kind of a way to, yes, there is recreation, but there's also skills that we can learn. We also offer mindfulness kind of session, coloring books, beadings, little crafts that we do for an hour before we go play pickleball. So there's always two sides of the evenings where the sports are luckily supported by the volunteers. I'm super happy. I'm not a super sporty person. I don't have great skills, but I will hang out with young people all day long. But I have the greatness from the volunteers to help coach or mentor the sports skills kind of side of it. But that brought the community together. So we have young people growing up. We have families coming up. We have healthy adults that are there, we are trying to build a network for the young people. At school, they do have access to adults, healthy adults. Our local First Nation, the Champagne-Anajiac, have a beautiful youth program. They know that they can access there, but we're creating more. Those are spaces that have been there forever, where the community still feels that there's a need that is not responded by those two current places. Having BGC, I feel like I'm putting a lot of, yeah, we're doing this, but I don't do much really. I'm supporting the champions that are already within the community, and I talk with them. I say, how can I help you? And I think that's a way that I foresee being successful in rural communities across the territory, when we can support someone who already has the passion, who already has the desire to do something. We're just kind of boosting them up and lifting them up. I've worked in rural community across, well, not across, but in Yukon and in Quebec. I've worked in Nunavik on an Inuit reserve there for a few years. And I've learned a lot that if you're coming in and say, okay, this is my agenda, this is the program I need to deliver, and this is the goal I want to reach, there's really good chances that they're gonna say, well, you can go do your thing there, and then we'll be here. I've learned to just show up. I don't have a personal agenda, I just show up. And then they're gonna tell me, how can I help them? Listening, observing is how I get my information. Yeah, I see there's a need there. Here's how I can help. Working with the Inuit when I was fresh out of college, and my first lunchtime with the actual young people, where they opened a cardboard box, threw that on the floor, they put a frozen caribou leg on it, and a couple of little dish with soy sauce. They give me an axe. They say, bon appétit. I'm like, okay, but I've never said no. I sat down with the kids that did not speak French. I was just learning English. They spoke Inuktitut. But I just leaned there on the floor and I did try the caribou. It's delicious. and I really loved it. But showing up with an attitude that I'm here for you and I care for you is something that really helped in the youth programs. BGC is the first employer that I've worked with that actually cares that way. We care about the people, very much so. Our staff and our young folks are the ones who drive this organization. I'm going back a little bit, BGC in Whitehorse, we actually have 4 service locations. So we have an early years center in Riverdale called the Learning Tree Center. We have 2 after-school locations at Whitehorse Elementary and at Tekini Elementary, where we do after-school care from 3 to 5. And we have our youth center at beside the food bank on Alexander Street. But we have a full spectrum to be in the life of a young person forever. We welcome them as young as 12 months old in our early years center. Then they migrate to our after school care when they're in school. And then at 12 years old, they can access our youth center. From the youth center, in the last year and a bit, we really have been implementing a youth employment program where we hire a young person. We totally know and we understand that they're green. There's no, most of them don't have skills, don't have the attitude that will be expected from another employer. So we take them and we walk them through that journey. We get them ready for, okay, you want to go and start a career, you have everything you need in your pocket to be a successful employee. So our youth employment program is really, really getting traction right now. And then we have what we like to call the alumni, or you can just become a staff at BGC, and will be your career. So we have the opportunity to really follow someone through their entire life. And our young people, they feel that. We want to be in their life for a lifetime. And everything we do is to support the young people. Our the organization itself, I think we came down a little bit, but we're 75% youth employed. That's how we make it work. It's for youth, by the youth. We are 100% inclusive, sorry, we're not exclusive, we're inclusive. And that is right on the door when you walk in. We have kind of an Arctic entry, and even parents know that they cannot cross this door because it's 100% a safe youth space, inclusive for any of them. There's some young people that they really come to club because they feel they can be themselves there. They know that there will be no adults that don't belong there. Like, yes, we invite guests, we invite community mentors to come and hang out with us, but they know that our physical space, as much as our emotional space, is for youth, by youth, and it's safe. Just showing up with that attitude and the way that it transfers through everything we do, the care that we have for the young people. I've worked a lot with teens, and they are a very strong mirror of what you can bring to them. If you're not doing the work that you do with the passion and care that they hope to see in someone that hosts a youth program, they're not gonna buy into it. Like, I've seen it myself where, there's folks where they have a job because they have to have a job to pay the bills and things like this, but I really believe deep in my heart that for youth programs, when you work with kids, you need to have that passion. You need to show them that, yes, you care, and yes, you're gonna show up there every day, and you're gonna come back. Even if it's hard, you're gonna be there again. And that's also something that I learned working with the community. I resonate a whole lot with our keynote yesterday, Clayton, when he spoke of non-Indigenous folks trying to not save a community, but just trying to support and help. And it really resonated to what I'm trying to do in the community. I've been in my community. I'm a resident there, been there for 5 years. Keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. There's adults that I've worked with, and they're like, yeah, keep going because it's working. The children in my community knows that it's my office, but it's not my home. But whenever I am in the community, I will always be a safe person that they can come to. Doesn't matter which logo I have on my shirt, I will be that safe space for them in the community. Through BGC, I can make it my work, and it helped me to bring my passion and what I strive to do with my career within my hometown. But if there's any other community within the territory or just up north, Nunavut or Northwest Territories too, we just need the invite, and we're more than happy to come and help you folks and share what we've learned, share our tools and everything. So if you want to know more about BGC, then just let me know and I'll be happy to answer some questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Isabel. I know the VGC was a big part of my life growing up in my community in Newfoundland, and it's great to hear that those services are being offered in so many communities. Thank you. We'll pass it over to Lindsay.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Good job, guys. So I didn't have anything, but when this morning they're like, "Do you have a presentation?" I was like, "Well, no, I'm not supposed to be here." But I do have a bunch of pictures that I actually did. I delivered a presentation at the rec gathering a couple weeks ago. So this was my presentation for that. Those that know me, and a few of you guys do, like, I am a rogue rambler. I can talk ad nauseum about recreation, about community, about what I've done, what I think needs to happen. So I'm going to be mindful of time, but I have no sense of it. So maybe keep me on track a little bit. I'll try to leave a lot of space for questions and stuff, because I think that's the intent here. And because I had nothing prepared, I had the luxury of just taking notes over the last half an hour of hearing these guys talk, which has now given me some big key points to talk about. And I'll also, I quickly sent Roger a message this morning being like, "Hey, I guess I have to fill in for you. What were you going to talk about?" So I got a couple points from him, and then I'm going to roguely ramble for a few minutes, and then we will go. But one thing while you're watching this, I think you'll see a lot of variation of what a space can look like in the context of rural recreation. So I am going to speak again, and I'll preface that I'm pretty mindful not to speak on behalf of the communities I've worked in. I speak with good intent and I speak with experience, but I sometimes maybe don't carry the same opinion as everybody. So when I comment on stuff, like for example, sometimes I know what we don't need, and we don't need $6 million pieces of infrastructure in our communities necessarily. I do not necessarily want to speak on behalf of the governments I work for, or on behalf of the little people that might be lobbying right now for one of these spaces to be created in their community. So this is just me speaking kind of based on my experiences. I think one thing I'm noticing in our little talking notes here is that the whole topic of this is building positive and inclusive youth spaces, social and physical environments. And listening to these guys, I think a lot of the conversation was really leaning towards a social environment that we need to create. And it wasn't so much physical environments. However, that being said, and it's a point I made earlier, which I will lobby a lot against, as a rec person, I think rec has really become synonymous with childcare in Yukon. And what do we need for these kids? Well, they need safe spaces. They need youth centers. They need these drop-in centers. And I will kind of argue, and again, this is in my sentiments, not necessarily on behalf of the communities I've worked in, that is true, that is wise, and that does need to happen. That does not necessarily always need to be recreation's role. So to hear BGC coming into the communities, right, and having these safe spaces and having a place where it's for the youth by the youth is so valuable. My world of recreation can provide all these other spaces as well. And these spaces need to not be so age-based. And because I think for kids, and we want to also talk about substance use prevention, the kids need role models. They need that social environment. They need these people that are connecting the dots with everybody. And so a lot of our focus, what I'm trying to do, and it's shifting some culture in the world of recreation, is to move a little bit away from age-based programs and more towards interest-based programs, because I want to connect the kids with the adult role models that they need to be able to pursue their own passions, to be able to develop their own character. And if that's skateboarding and getting cheered on in the fist bumps at lunchtime, right? That's not a big construct of a physical space. The skate park it is, but that's that social environment. That's connecting them with adults that are exhibiting positive behaviors and then that they connect with. So the whole piece of substance use, getting adults involved, we had a few comments throughout the presentations too, where it's easier said than done, especially in the rural communities. Some of these parents don't have the skill sets to step up in those ways. And to focus on our kids, we need to focus on our parents, and we need to focus on our adults, and we need to create and foster role models in these communities. And that for our youth programs to succeed, we need those places to connect these dots. And okay, so that's my first little road ramble. I'm going to take a look. So again, and oh yeah, and in the Planet, like the Planet Youth one, like that's specifically the big quote that was on there. It is not the facility that has a protective factor. So when we're talking about these spaces, communities do need a safe place. The home isn't always the safest place for them. So having these youth centers, these drop-in centers are great. Creating more of them when we want to ask what the youth want. Some people say, well, they're not coming to the youth center. Well, get a bigger TV, get more gaming systems. Okay, that's great for that space, but that's not rec. So that's not my world. So reverting back to creating spaces and looking at this thing, like there's spaces are everything you have in your community, right? It's utilizing all these outdoor spaces. These aren't massive infrastructure. You'll see, and I will put this note out there. There's a big difference between Old Crow infrastructure and even Teslin. We have a beautiful, beautiful rink in Teslin. We get to utilize that for our programs. It's a great place to use. Old Crow, on the other hand, doesn't. And latest update, which breaks my heart, is it's currently being used to store all the building material for the new seniors complex. So there's no ice, and these kids don't have a lot of other spaces. There's a school gym. We have a great youth center there, and the rink. So why is that not a focal point of a community that doesn't have, and they're building these beautiful infrastructures there, but they're forgetting about the baseline. What do we need? We need these kids to have something to do. And that is an example of a physical environment. So what are they going to do? Ashwin's going to go up there and help teach because they have no teachers. There's no capacity up there right now. There's not enough people working with the youth. But Ashwin's going to go sub, and he's going to probably end up out on the slough or a pond, flooding it for these kids. So we need more adults. We need these kind of places. We don't necessarily need massive facilities, but what we do need is the capacity for people to take care of the facilities in their community, which isn't always the case either. Flooding that rink, and it took me a long time to learn this. It finally we brought up a professional. Like I was the bane of my existence flooding that rink in Old Crow. This guy finally came up because we were looking like, hey, what do we do? Like we need an alternative here. And he basically said, we've been trying to flood a beach. And I was like, oh, frick, like that. That makes a lot of sense as to why it was so impossible, right? Sometimes you need this, but like we didn't have the capacity to even to maintain. Like, so to go and say that we need a better facility isn't necessarily the solution either, because we might not have the capacity to actually maintain that facility. So, okay, I'm going to revert back to some comments that Roger had given me. So there's some stuff that we can do to like help better our outdoor spaces or our land or like naturally given spaces. Utilizing more outside that need less capacity, because that's some things we don't always have in the community. So programs like bringing in other resources, our kids respond super well to guest facilitators. What, again, we don't need is you to think that you have a program that's going to work for our communities and that we have to deliver it, because again, that's a capacity issue. So your willingness to actually come and into our place, good adult role models, you bring in a program, something that's different, you can develop your passions or deliver your passions, which we can't always be all the things for all the people. That's a great thing. And you can utilize our gyms, you can utilize what we have, we can utilize anything, we can go outside. Programs like RPA's Real Leader program, so there's a couple plugs for RPA as well, helps fund people in communities to deliver passion programs that rec people might not be able to do. So that's a great opportunity. Like you might not be working full-time rec, but maybe you love skateboarding and you're willing to spend some of your time maybe as a volunteer, but maybe you do need a bit of incentive. You need some programming material, you need some healthy snacks. The Real Leader program can help build these people in the communities as well. their waffle program. Also, maybe we just like they have a lending library of ski equipment and kick sleds and snowshoes that you can borrow for communities and stuff like that. So it's utilizing the spaces we have without building big capacity. And then ideally connecting the waffle program with a leader in your community to be that adult that's going to help run these programs. Because again, I am not speaking on behalf of everybody, but I'm pretty sure that most rec departments are operating at pretty full capacity. Oftentimes it's young people that maybe don't have the skill set to move beyond. Again, sorry, this wasn't developed for today, so this was just a bunch of pictures. Yeah, okay. Let me just revert back. So I think that's a good like example too of like really helping define what do we need like to build better spaces, social environment. I think you have to give our governments, we have to make a space. Okay, so to hit that keyword, to make a space in government for recreation to not just serve youth. So that being said too, like there's no rec department in Haines Junction right now. We need to make space in our government to make recreation and make youth a priority. And then we have to define like kind of whose roles it is. So I'm saying I don't think the role of recreation needs to be the youth center. So whose role is that? Because it is an important space to have in a community. And better defining and better collaborating with the people and with our governments. Teslin's really unique in having that joint recreation fund. Our government should make space. All of our communities should make space for recreation to be a priority, because we do work with rec, but we also are supposed to be serving adults, and we are able to utilize all the spaces, right? Recreation's indoor, outdoor, it's young, it's old, it's culture, it's land, it's soccer in a gym, right? It's so diverse. So these spaces, like, they don't have to be $7 million in infrastructure. The space that needs to be created is that it is a priority, right? And that we have the capacity. That's a space that needs to be built. And when we don't have the capacity to deliver it, how is our government stepping in to make sure, and this is something I said in my other one that now I'm totally going road, so I'm gonna try to rein it back in, but we need baselines that we don't dip below. Like when I left Oak Crow, it broke my heart because I thought I had it so set up for the next person to come in. And then it kind of collapsed. How do we step in and help make sure that or when the rink goes to shambles, how do we ensure that we're stepping in as a bigger body to make sure our communities don't ever dip below what we've started to create? Our facilities don't turn into covered storage for building material when it's one of two options for kids. So we need to make space in government for recreation, and we need to make it so that it's not just serving youth. The goal is the youth, but the youth need role models. So we need to serve everybody. We need to create healthy communities to create healthy kids. And it is going to take a community, because not of all our parents are equipped to be that person that's going to make sure their kid's home at 10 o'clock at night. So that model may not serve our communities. It's not to say it's wrong, and the data is great. We all want to get there. We want our kids to be healthier. We want them to make informed choices. We want them all to be like these kids yesterday that are sitting up here speaking positively. But when I thought about that too, like last night, those kids are all well equipped. They're the ones that recognize that their involvement in sport is what's helped keep them on the path. What about their buddies that don't have that capacity to recognize the benefits of their choices? And, you know, for me, I was a rogue rambler as a kid too, you know, like I had super strong parents, I had sports, but like I also needed to try everything and fail like more than once. Like it, you know, it killed my parents because I didn't learn lessons, and I could be friends with the guys in the smoke pit. I spent a lot of time there. I wasn't necessarily even a smoker, but like those were my buddies. And then I had my hockey friends, and then I had my drama friends who were super weird and smoking all sorts of things, you know, like, and I did too, but I always had sports and such a care and love and passion for hockey that always kept me in check. So sometimes, like, and again, I'm definitely not speaking on behalf of the communities here, but the abstinence approach isn't okay. Sometimes I just want to say to these kids, hey, you know, like the problem isn't that they're using, it's how they're using. It's not that we're drinking, it's how we're drinking, that binge style drinking, right? And that's uninformed sense, and that's lack of role modeling, that's lack of understanding, like, well, how it could look different. It's lack of balance. It's the mentality where we want them to at least do anything else. So it's creating spaces, and I think that's that social environment more than a physical environment. And you guys spoke to it and all these things. It's more that social aspect. So we need more adults. We need more people that are going to show up for these kids and keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up and not being these one-offs. And we need to focus on that. I think that's most of all my little notes. So let's leave it at that. So I don't go. I just got a little time warning. So let's open it up and let's have a bit more of a conversation for sure.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you for the baller move of not just agreeing to fill in at the last minute, but hauling a presentation out of your back pocket. Very nice, thank you. We'd like to open it up to any questions, and we'll be watching online for any questions that pop up there as well. Awesome.
Hey, thanks for those presentations. It was really great. And that you touched on it a few times, especially the Boys and Girls Club, and you had mentioned as well is that not just limiting it under 18, making it open to young people in general and young adults, because I think that's a big thing is recreation is so heavily supported for those early years, supported by government, supported by agencies, things like that, because they're children. But then there's kind of also the expectation that after 18 it's work or school, but like it's work and you're an adult now and these are adult things you have to do. But a lot of the young people aren't quite equipped or aren't ready to kind of take on or just finish that childhood at 18. And so, you know, especially over 18 also is that there's the monetary aspect where it's like everything's paid. You got to pay to do it. You got to pay to softball. You got to pay to access this, floor hockey over here, you know. Everything is kind of more, there's a lot more of a monetary weight to it. And so I think, you know, when we talk about health prevention, you can prevent at early ages too. And this piece can also support preventing long-term use after into those young adults. And I know there's different strategies for different age groups and different life spaces. But I think, yeah, there's not enough of that. We can just have a hangout space for 20-year-olds. You know, and that space can be during the day, it can be in the evening, and we're going to continue doing those things you've done as a child or that you had exposure to as a young person, and we're going to continue that into your adulthood. And maybe you're not ready to be a mentor right now in those spaces because that's maybe sometimes the expectation for an older participant, but you can still participate. And I think that that's something that you guys are obviously considering, and it's a part of it, but it's something that I've seen that it's like, there's a pretty hard line there, and something that, and like with skateboarding too, right? It's something you can do at all ages, but you know, how do those pieces include that kind of span? That's something I wanted to mention. Thanks.
I think I'd like to talk about that. We have recognized that a whole lot at BGC that in Canada, 18 years old, you got the seal of approval and here you go, have your life. And the services stop and the opportunities stop and things like that. And we really try to bridge that gap with BGC where we have the Monday nights, our youth center is not open for 12 to 18. The Monday nights, it will restart very, very shortly here due to staff capacity. We're not able to host that, but it's a program that's called RISE, and it's for 19 to 30 years old, where it's the same youth center that they've been hanging out since they're 12 years old, but that space is open just for these folks because we've been hearing a whole lot. I'm an adult. I am struggling with my challenge. I want to be successful with sobriety, or I just don't want to hang out where there's substance consumptions. There's no options. If you're 18 years old, the only place you could go recreate or hang out socially, if you're not into sports or things like that, are the bars. In communities, that reality is even more present because there's not other options. Like in Dakota Hinge Junction, and the CFN Youth Center has started to open some nights where they do open until midnight for 18 plus. And it's just a space where you can go play pool, you can go play card, you can go socialize, but there's no substance involved, and it's a safe and healthy space. So it is a big gap, I think, in services that we see in Canada where the 18 years old are just left for themselves. But I think it's a bigger picture. Recreation helps bridge those where we open spaces where healthy adult and youth can collaborate and play together, which is very important. But it is something that needs to be worked on more because it affects your food, your housing, everything. Thanks, Ben.
I think that's a super good point too. And like, I revert always back to recreation, so I love you doing that as well. But again, this wasn't necessarily a recreation gathering as it was a couple weeks ago. So that space consideration is super important, right? Because it is. It's you're either at the youth center or and then it's the bars. So where is that kind of like in between? And but I think the important thing about like talking rec too is like all the kids yesterday, and rec's pretty diverse. Like the comment about the art, right? And like so in terms of like an actual really beautiful facility space, like up in Dawson, like their youth center was incredible, and it was like so I can imagine if they had opened that up more readily to other age groups, or there was some defined nights, like how that could be really positive as well. And maybe that's something to think about, some design elements in the community that it's I think the one thing though why we always target the like the younger kids, it's an easier buy-in, right? Like when you move to a community, trying to get a 13 and 14-year-old kid to buy into what you're offering is a lot more difficult than the 6 and 9-year-old kids are going to come to everything. And then if you have the willingness to commit your time, by the time I left Old Crow, those 9-year-olds are the 14, 15-year-old kids that are coming down now and messaging me when they had issues. And, so that relationship was able to be built. But that's not always the case when there's constant turnover in staff and stuff to build those relationships. I think YFNED is a really good place right now to help fill that gap with those older kids because they're able to connect with them in different ways. And the relationship now can maybe be forged with YFNED more so than even the individual, or if you can start to really forge those relationships as Bite was able to do because they were delivering consistently. Boys and Girls Club is delivering consistency, even though the person changes, the organization is what the relationship kind of is also. But yeah, I don't know. We got to get those older people too.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a few questions online. We'll get to as many questions as we can, both online and in person, but I'll jump in with this one. This is, I have a question for anyone. Does anyone have any ideas on how we can create and foster role models?
I think that's something that we are currently supporting right now in Haines Junction, where the role models were the actual volunteers that were putting up those opportunities during the evening, recreation opportunity. And when I started to talk with them and then try to find a source of funding to help them, I had a great discussion with the president of our cross-country ski association in Haines Junction as well. And she's been involved in recreation for many, many years in communities. And to prevent volunteer burnout in recreation, I think that was her main kind of point. That is not a barrier, but a challenge. So using the resources and the funding that's available to have maybe some honorarium or some money to support what's already there. I think that's a good way to prevent the burnout, or just support them and the greatness that they're doing, and so just keep it going. Money is a big talk loud, and it's a good help, but also the human capacity, bringing whatever they need. I think it's what I would answer to that.
Again, skate parks, very, very informal. So one interesting thing that I've seen happen is with volunteer stewardship and such. And so there's a few of us who, I bike, so I have a little dustpan that I carry with me just to do, and it's a small thing, but it's just cleaning up, right? So, the bowl gets filled with dirt. It's kind of unskateable, but I'll go sweep it out. Actually, Ian's really good because he'll come and sweep things out. And so when you see the people in your community taking care of a place, all of a sudden I've got kids coming up to me and saying, did you bring your dustpan? Because I really want to clean up over here. And so when it's your homeboys who are taking care of a place, those kids, the kids who are friends with those kids, I mean, maybe they'll make a mess because I cleaned it up, but if their buddies are cleaning up, they're going to be way less liable to wreck the place. And so you try to give them some positive reinforcement on those small things. There's this one kid, I think he's 16 or 17, and he's just a natural born coach. And you just see him with his friends who are learning, and he's just like, you know what, I think if you put your foot just 2 inches over here, and then all of a sudden you see that kid succeeding. And I went over to this kid Simon one day and I said, you're really, really good at that. You're a natural born teacher. And you just saw him lift up, and you just see him doing it more and more. So I think there's those sorts of opportunities I find for, just small little things. And even there's definitely, because it's a free space, and the city doesn't really pay that much attention to it, there's opportunities for really some ugly behavior there and such, right? We've got kids come over on their lunch break and just chug a lug vodka, and then maybe they'll take the bottle and throw it, and then we're 3 weeks cleaning up broken glass and stuff. And there was some situations in the spring where some kids were bringing bikes or whatever, and they were just throwing them, in the middle of the bowl, and, chip the concrete, blah, blah, blah. And, you talk to the kids and you're like, listen, this is your park, like the kids who use it, and this is your park. So don't be afraid. I mean, don't put yourself in harm's way, but don't be afraid to call out bad behavior, and so towards the end of this season, somehow a desk showed up at the park, and somebody thought it was a good idea to pick it up over their head and throw it in the bowl. And this kid comes up to me, he's like, Joe, you would have been really, really proud of me, because this kid came here and he threw the desk in there. He probably was not polite and nice about it, but he said, get that desk out here right now. And so it's just, you could see this kid taking on a leadership role in protecting his park. And there's little things, right?
I think and I wish there was a golden answer, because that's what we want. But again, we talk about in the communities, like the same 10 people, the STPs is a pretty commonly understood statement in our world, because it's the same 10 people always doing stuff. So I think one thing, like the real leaders, is allow something, like don't ask for the broad volunteerism, right? Like have a specific ask. You're specifically interested in something. How can we utilize that in our programs? And let them like work on their own passions to deliver to role model. And it doesn't need to be a big group thought. Like we think we need to shift our focus from success being in numbers to success being one kid that got connected with one person that has like interests and is willing to role model. As for the youth, it's building role models. We can't have any more forums where we invite the kids to speak and take no action on what they've said, because that does not create any role modeling. Right? So that young lady who's obviously a phenomenal role model, we need to foster that. So when she steps up, Ian, and says, despite us saying we have these resources when the kids are taking that survey, and she's like, well, no, there was not that support. Let's make sure we take action and allow her voice to have been actionably heard. These kids that are up here, one kid had a great suggestion. Maybe we need to get a list of what they're interested in, and we need to get a list of people that have interests, and let's help connect the dots. Let's put action to their suggestions, because they're going to be like, hey, look, I had a great idea. It was heard and it's being implemented, and it's probably going to work. So I think like we need to allow the role models to be role models by supporting what they're saying with action, not just sticky notes and voice, like ears. It needs to be actionable.
Thank you. Were there any other questions from the room? Yeah. Yes, yeah. You can go right ahead.
Thanks to all three of you, especially to Lindsay, who walked in this morning, hadn't even taken off her jacket, and we said to her, Lindsay, this has happened, can you step in? And she thought about it for like a second and a half and said, sure. And here she is. I wanted to pick up on some of the stuff that Joe was talking about, and it has to do with the role modeling a bit. I have a lot of thoughts about skate parks, so I'll try to keep this short. It's interesting because it's a physical space that is so amazing, and especially here in Whitehorse. I mean, this park is incredible. at the cost of millions of dollars. So in some ways, it's consistent with this idea of building physical spaces that are safe, that are effective, that youth want to hang out in. At the same time, it's almost the opposite of a structured, organized activity, which is a real focus in Iceland, for example. It's almost the opposite of being organized and structured. But as Joe was saying, it's got this amazing flattening of any kind of hierarchy. And so it really relies on a culture that's built around that place. And as Joe was saying, he has always been, like, the first thing Joe does when he gets to the skate park, I've seen it, he wanders around, he's got gloves, he picks up the garbage and stuff. And I'm assuming that was partly inspired by Amanda. She must be over 100 now. Hey, Joe, Amanda, she's still around?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's 103. We talked to her the other night, brought her some food.
Yeah.
Marty took her for a walk. Yeah, for sure.
And every Sunday, or probably other days too, Amanda would just wander around, even the old skate park, and would just clean up garbage. And the kids would see that. So this winter, inspired by, or spring, I guess, inspired by Joe and Amanda, I would just go and I'd be shoveling snow out. And that was the first time, maybe the only time, I got that beaver tail clap of skateboards. I was like, oh, is that for me?
I gave you one for dropping in the bowl. Come on, dude.
Right. But I told you that so I could get to this, though. And I haven't had a chance to debrief this with you yet, Joe. The very last day, the Sunday before it dumped snow on Whitehorse, I said to my son, like, we better go. This might be the last chance to hit the skate park. And we get there, and so we go to the bowl, and there's a bunch of kids, bunch of skate park regulars, mostly clearly sort of indigenous kids, a couple of really big guys, and they've got a bottle on a tree, and they're just chucking rocks at it. And I thought, oh, that's weird. But every time I go to the skate park, I remind myself, this is not my space, this is their space. So when other parents have come up to me and said, Ian, what about this music these kids are playing? I'm just like, you can do something if you want. I don't think it's my place to say that. So I see this and I go, I'm just gonna remind myself, this is not my place. If they want to chuck rocks at a bottle and bust it, I'll go and clean up the bottle afterwards. I'm like, that's what Joe would do. But the rocks are coming onto the pavement a bit, like they're approaching the bowl. So I'm like, do I say something? I'm not gonna say something. Eventually, my son, who's 8, is in the bowl, and he's at the point now where he can get pretty high on these 10-foot walls. So if a rock flies into the bowl, it's a potentially pretty serious situation. Sure enough, rock flies into the bowl while Henry's in there ratting it. So this is when I was like, okay, I gotta say something. I walked straight over, and before I even had a chance to think about it, I was like, guys, what is the plan here? Like, if you wanna break stuff, fine, I'll clean it up after, but I said, I might have used some colorful language. I said, you guys, if you were skating the bowl and some kid threw a rock in there, you would be pissed. And there was this awkward hesitation of like, how is this gonna go? I'm about to get beat up. And one of the kids looked at me and said, sorry. And they went over and started picking up all the rocks that had gone onto the deck of this and into the bowl, and they cleaned it all up and pushed it to the side. I don't know what to make of this story, other than I think the time I put into shoveling the place, being there, sweeping up, trying to skateboard myself, and this sort of flattened hierarchy, I hope that through those actions, that maybe I had accumulated enough kind of, I'm not sure if respect is the right word, but equality to be able to say that to those kids and they could respond in that way.
Thank you, Ian. And thank you, everybody. I apologize to anyone online who still had comments. We do have to finish up. Other groups are coming back for lunch, and we're a couple of minutes over. But thank you to our presenters. Thank you for joining us for our session, and we'll move into lunch.